Great to be here, and thank you everyone for joining. My name is Michal Schecter. I'm a Principal Product Manager leading the Sentinel UEBA domain.
Hi, everyone. Great to be with you today. I'm Taylor Wong. I'm a Senior Product Manager for the CXC team for Microsoft Sentinel and XDR.
Thank you, Taylor. So today we are going to talk about the new UEBA Behaviors layer. And the presentation is called From Chaos to Clarity, and we hope that once we are done, it will be very, very clear, speak of clarity, why we called it that. So we will review for the first part, what is the UEBA Behaviors layer, what does it do, what it comes to solve, and what is the value it can bring to you. And then we will, of course, also see a demo on how to utilize this layer and this data, and also how to enable it in the portal. So first things first, what is a behavior? A behavior describes something that happened in your organization, providing explainability and security context to the raw telemetry. Basically, it wants to describe something that has happened that has meaning. So who did what to whom in your environment and why it matters. What we are building and what we will present to you today is the behaviors data layer. So behaviors serve as a building block. It's not something that happens, for example, on query time. It can serve as a building block for all of your processes in the SOC, whether it's investigation, whether it's hunting, monitoring your critical assets, and of course, your detections. Each behavior maps the entities involved, remember who did what to whom, and their roles. So were they impacted, were they related, were they the actors? It also ties it to the MITRE ATT&CK framework to provide the meaning and the security context. Behaviors are not anomalies or low fidelity alerts. They are descriptive. They describe something that happened. Of course, they might indicate an attack that is evolving. They might indicate a suspicious pattern, but it's all usually with other building blocks that come together to demonstrate that. The security context, the MITRE ATT&CK framework, comes to describe what this might mean in the framework of a suspicious behavior, of a suspicious pattern. Just to talk about the data layers for a moment. So we have the raw telemetry. We have logs coming in from products, whether it's Microsoft logs from the different Microsoft Defenders, and whether it is non-Microsoft logs, such as AWS CloudTrail or GCP audit logs, or any other cloud provider, identity provider, and network logs. Those are flowing in from the different products into Microsoft Sentinel. We know what alerts are, right? We describe them here as work items for the SOC, just because they not only describe a potential attack or suspicious activity, but also because you are required, whether by human or some kind of automation or AI, to address them, to investigate them, to resolve them, whether they are benign or false positive, or stop the attack, take any required measurements, and remediate. And of course, we have the incidents, which are one alert or more, that describes the full attack story. Behaviors come in the middle. They come to bridge the gap between the raw telemetry, however it comes in from the different products, and the different processes in the SOC. It's something that happened that has security context. In that sense, security context means action and intent. A few examples just to make this real. You don't need to dive into each one of these behaviors, just to give you a sense of how it looks and make it more concrete. So for example, here we have the behaviors account operation burst that works on top of CyberArk operations. This comes from common security logs, and this is a behavior that represents an aggregation of events. So we have events that are coming in one after the other. The behavior describes that within a 30 minutes window, a CPM service account, and you can see here actually which one, performed 3 credential management operations with specific outcomes and where they originated from. You can see the minor mapping here to both tactics and techniques, and the explanation of why this behavior matters in the context of security. Now, what you're seeing here is, of course, a slide, but this description you're seeing, the contextual description with the entities, with the explanations, with the time frame, with the logic, and of course, why it matters. This is actually how the description of the behaviors will look in your environment in the table. So this is not for the sake of the slide. This is how it looks in production. Another example from CyberArk is the behavior CyberArk credential use. Here again, we have a sequence that requires two events in order: credential retrieval and credential usage. So same user, same source host, same target system. Here again, we are describing to you exactly what has happened and why it matters with its minor mapping. As you can see below, we are actually tying this to techniques and not just one. So we will provide you the full context of that behavior and why it matters. If you would like to dive deeper into the entities and their roles and more information on them, you have this in a supporting table, behavior entities, and Taylor will show you later in the demo how you can tie the two together to get the full context of both the behavior and the entities. I would also like to show you this example of network path analysis. This is based on AWS CloudTrail logs, where an AWS principal creates network insight paths and then starts an analysis on that same path. So now we are moving a bit away from aggregation, or it's not simple, but straightforward aggregation, into a required sequence that has security meaning and is something we believe you should have the visibility to in your environment as value over your raw logs. So the raw logs can be from different products. Here, again, we're talking about AWS CloudTrail. They can be in different formats. They can be in this table or that table, but this behavior, for example, from AWS and the previous behaviors from CyberArk will all come into the same behavior info table. So you will have a very, very simple way to look at the different behaviors from the different sources in one schema, in one format, with all the information you require there. So here, for example, we have this AWS principal that created a network insight paths. You have the IPs and all the data here, and then started a reachability analysis on the same path. Here you can see the minor mapping is even more extensive. We have 4 techniques here, providing you with the full security context that you need. The explanation you see at the end will also appear in the behavior description. So you will always be able to understand why this is something that is worth looking at. I will use this example. I won't go through it as well to verbosely to explain that the rules of the behaviors are created in the UEBA engine. So we have the logic being created in the backend, and once the logic is created, it actually has a KQL query, which is the one that is actually being ran over your logs in near real time and creating those behaviors. Very important to say. So from raw logs to behaviors, we have this transition from raw telemetry, where you have to be the expert. You have to know all the logs, all the schemas, all the originating products, all the event types, understand their meaning, handle their volume, and of course, query them in different schemas, turned into this layer of clarity and of meaning. Using the logic I mentioned before, the raw logs are coming in, and in near real time, pending, of course, the different time windows, as I shared before. Some behaviors require just a sequence of specific events, and then they're created. Some behaviors look at a time window of 10 minutes, 15, or 30 minutes, depends on the specific behavior, and create this one line in the same table. So just to clarify what is the transition today. So today we have either the raw data or alerts and incidents, and now we have this new layer, who did what to whom and why it matters. Instead of many logs with different schemas and types, you have one schema for all behaviors, by the way, across UEBA and XDR. So if you have, for example, Microsoft Defender for cloud apps, and you know behavior info and behavior entities tables because you see MDA behaviors there, you have the same schema. We are going from no security context. So as you well know, the row telemetry is not mapped to MITRE. You don't have the security context on what those logs means. You actually have to do it yourself. All of your SOC actually has to know this, whether it's analysts or hunters or detection engineers, and spend time on it. It's not just a matter of knowing, but a matter of what you do with your time. And we have, so in behaviors, we have the MITRE attack mapping. So each behavior is mapped to MITRE. This is a prerequisite for a behavior to be created. We are transitioning from raw logs to security insights to show the value, the meaning, and what really matters to understand what happens in your environment. We would like to shorten the investigation time to minimize the volume and query failures due to, for example, network logs, high volume, and failures because of long query times, to aggregation and sequencing. Again, aggregation is not the goal. Providing meaning is the goal. So it's not simple aggregation based on static logic and thresholds. It's actually what is meaningful for you to know. To simple explainability, as you saw, and you will see it in the demo, this explainability appears as I showed it in the slides, in the tables, in natural language, so you can easily understand what happened. Behaviors should and will boost efficiency across investigation, detection, and hunting, providing context that today needs to be computed per case, per organization, per investigation or hunt. This allows you to improve your quality process, your ability to investigate attacks, to get more familiar with the threat landscape using the explanations we provide. It allows you to surface usage patterns easily, and we will also have the means to get you started with getting this value, and Taylor will demo this also in a moment. And it really allows you to switch from going to the raw logs into the meaningful layer of data. We already released this new layer about a month ago, and we were getting very good feedback from existing users and customers. And Taylor will also explain to you how you can get started even today. Those outputs, those behaviors have log analytics charges attached to them. So any one of you who is already a UEBA customer, you know how it works. So the outputs are ingested into log analytics, and your log analytics charges apply. Of course, make sure to read all the documentation about this as well. The logic behind the scenes is created either by our own Microsoft security researchers or by AI. The AI is not running in your environment. It's also only used to create the logic behind the scenes. So in our backend, what is actually working in production in your environments are the KQLs that contain the logic and create those behaviors. The existing supported data sources are AWS CloudTrail, GCP audit logs, and 2 vendors from Common Security Logs table, so Palo Alto Threats and CyberArk Vault. This is phase 1, as we will continue to expand our coverage both within a data source and to more data source. And I would like to invite you to share with us in whatever way you see fit, whether it's through the Q&A or afterwards by reaching out to us, which logs are the most valuable to you to get behaviors on top, whether it's because they're high volume, because they're hard to understand, or at least require a lot of expertise, or because you're sold on the idea to actually work on top of this knowledge and insights layer and not on top of just the raw logs. We thank you for your questions in the Q&A, and we will now I will transition to Taylor to take it from here to show you the demo.
Wonderful, thank you. So most SOC teams drown in alerts and raw logs, but today I'll show you how UEB Behaviors turns that noise into clear analyst-ready stories so you can understand what happened, who was involved, and whether it actually matters. We'll do this in a short end-to-end demo in 3 parts. 1, how to hunt and understand behaviors using advanced hunting, how to operationalize this with a behaviors workbook, and then how to enable behaviors in Defender so you can get started today. Behavior sits on top of the signals you're already collecting. So when you enable the behaviors layer, Sentinel will begin exporting and correlating activity into behavior patterns rather than isolated events. So instead of highlighting a suspicious activity or it's a signal of a potential security issue, this actually provides a neutral, structured summary enriched with MITRE attack mappings and entity roles. So next we will switch over to advanced hunting to dive into where analysts can really start exploring and understanding what's happening in their environment. Can you see my screen? Okay. Wonderful. So there are 2 types of behaviors: aggregated behaviors, which are volume-based behaviors or repeated actions over time, and sequence behaviors, which are event chains that can form from a logical series or a multi-stage activity. Behaviors aggregate over time and across APIs. So this behavior is actually represented in the behavior info table. So if you go into the Defender portal under investigation and response hunting and advanced hunting, you will go to advanced hunting and be able to run your queries here. Now note that the behaviors layer applies to other workloads such as MDE, MDI. So to narrow the focus on Sentinel behaviors, we'll filter by service source. So I want to point out a couple of core columns here. This title is a concise summary of the behavior, what kind of activity occurred. The description is where a lot of the value lies. This is what Michal was talking about and showing earlier. This is the neutral story of what happened, who did what to whom, and over what time frame. Now you'll also see that each behavior is correlated to the MITRE attack tactics and techniques. So you can immediately understand the security context and why it matters. The category column here shows the MITRE attack tactic, and this attack technique column shows the MITRE attack technique. Behaviors are normalized and enriched with this attack information so that hunters can search for meaningful patterns without depending on each source's schema. So in practice, teams often focus on a small number of high signal behaviors such as discovery or persistence. And these tend to be early stage or high impact attacker activity. And the behaviors layer helps surface them clearly without needing that deep query expertise. So as a SOC analyst, I might want to understand whether this activity is spiking in my environment and filter to see the distribution of behaviors by MITRE tactic. Now, this is a query that shows my behaviors information and filtered on the MITRE tactic. And I group by title so that I can see the count of behaviors over here. You can see that discovery, there were 80 behaviors that fell under that MITRE tactic. Now, I want to take a step deeper and look into this discovery behaviors and filter on the attack techniques and see which attack techniques were involved. And here I can see that T1069 and T1087 were involved. This aggregated behavior gives powerful context. Instead of reading through dozens or hundreds of raw events to relate, identity and access management, this behavior layer aggregates them into a single human-readable narrative that explains what happened. Now, one of the most important questions that analysts ask is what entities were involved in this behavior. So with IAM enumeration being a common early stage attack technique, I want to know who or what was involved. This is where the behavior entities table completes that story. A single behavior can involve multiple entities such as a user, an access key, IP addresses, a cloud resource. So understanding the relationship across different events provides that cohesive picture. So here I'm joining the behavior info table with the behavior entities on behavior ID. And then I'll summarize the entity types into a list. So instead of multiple rows, we get one row with multiple entities per behavior. And you can see that in this column here. From here, a SOC analyst can ask questions like, did the actions originate from a familiar IP or an unusual one? And remember that a behavior is not an alert or a verdict. It's a structured summary that gives humans the context so that they can then decide what is risky. It reveals patterns and relationships so that humans can interpret them quickly. Next, we will transition over to the behaviors workbook. Advanced hunting is great for deep analysis, but many teams want out-of-the-box insights that they can use every day. So if I go over to Microsoft Sentinel, Content Management, and Content Hub, I can then search for UEBA, and I will find the UEBA Behavior and Analysis Workbook, and I can install it here. Taking a look at the workbook is a great place where customers can use this as a template and customize the queries behind the workbook based on their needs. So once enabled, it gives you a curated view across behaviors, entities, and tactics. No custom KQL required. The active entities shows the number of unique entities involved in the behavior over the last 7 days. So it helps answer the question, how widespread is this activity? And you can see your total number of behaviors as well as your unique tactics, which is your MITRE tactics. This behavior timeline trend shows a representation of new behaviors generated over time, and you can monitor the overall behaviors volume. Spikes here can be indicative of emerging attack activity or environmental changes, and then you can also see the total sum down here. This MITRE covered by tactic can show you, okay, I have 480 MITRE or behaviors that are linked and correlated to the discovery tactic. There are 450 for privilege escalation and continuing on. The top behavior types shows me which ones are the most prevalent by volume. And then if I navigate over at the top to the hunting tab, you'll be able to see some recommended hunting queries. For example, the rarest behavior. So here I'm able to see what happens infrequently, but suddenly may need immediate investigation because it happened 100 times for this IAM principles, the one that we were just looking at. If I look over to the right here, I see the attack chain detector. So the MITRE tactics help us envision the attack chain. Therefore, by looking at the entities that are involved when multiple MITRE attacks, for this example, 3 or more, I can quickly spot multi-stage attacks. And this is involving discovery, privilege escalation, and initial access. So being able to see this entity involved and going to dig deeper. I can take this query and then go back to the advanced hunting page to continue my investigation. Looking down here at entity velocity tracker and behavior velocity tracker. So this helps identify activity that exceeds normal baselines. For example, you see the daily average for this entity and this Amazon resource is 30 behaviors a day. But today's count, it jumped up to 146, which is 5 times more behaviors than the daily average. Over here, you can see the daily average for the cloud discovery and the IAM is 5 to 7, and then the today's count has jumped up to 40 to 50. Now, this isn't saying that something is happening, but it just gives analysts a spot to start their investigation and dig deeper. Heading over to the investigation tab. So this is a place where you can pivot from an incident to behaviors. You can paste a comma-separated list of entities in this first text box, and you'll be able to set the incident time, how many hours before you would like to see, and how many hours afterwards you would like to see. This timeline will show you which behaviors occurred, when they occurred, based on this column, the entities, and how they map to MITRE tactics as well. You can see that down here. So this gives a clear before, during, and after view of the activity. Now, finally, I will show you how to enable behaviors in your environment so that you can get started today. Now, remember that this is not a new data source. This is a new abstraction. So there's a couple of prerequisites that we will need to go over to get started. So make sure, one, that you have a connected workspace, Sentinel workspace in Defender. And currently we support Common Security Log, AWS CloudTrail, Palo Alto, Threats, GCP Log, CyberArk Vault, and we'll continue to expand this list of data sources, which is supported continuously. You'll need to have, in terms of permissions, Security Administrator in Microsoft Entra and Sentinel contributor role in your Sentinel workspace. In the Defender portal, you'll navigate to System Settings, Microsoft Sentinel, and then your SIM workspace. You'll select the workspace where you want to enable this layer, and then at the tabs at the top, you'll click New Behaviors Layer. Now, when you toggle the Enable Behaviors layer on, nothing will happen until you connect at least one data source. So making sure that you connect your data sources down here, and then select Connect. Within a few hours, you should start seeing Sentinel behavior data. To wrap up, UEBA Behaviors turns complex raw logs into clear, structured security insights, making it easier to understand, again, who did what to whom and why it matters. And this context is crucial to help analysts in their investigation. We talked about behaviors translating these raw signals into security insights, how advanced hunting lets you deeply explore and correlate behaviors, especially to the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and then the workbook that helps you start hands-on in a day-to-day way how to operationalize your security work. Here are a couple of resources to dive deeper, and that concludes our presentation for today, and I'll hand it back over to Emily.
Thanks so much, Taylor. And thank you everybody for joining. If you have any questions, please go ahead and send those through now and we can get those answered for you. And our first question for our presenters today is, do you need to be a UEBA customer?
I'll take it. Thank you, Emily. So first of all, we of course encourage all of you to take advantage of the value we provide in the existing UEBA capabilities, which is providing insights and anomalies and enrichments on top of raw telemetry. However, you do not need to be an existing UEBA customer or get anomalies and insights on raw telemetry to enable behaviors. So as Taylor showed in the screen before, when onboarding or going to the workspace settings to UEBA, you actually have two tabs. There is a tab dedicated to onboarding UEBA behaviors, and you do not need to enable the existing UEBA capabilities. Back to you, Emily.
Thank you. We did get one more question through. It says, can behavior data be ingested from Sentinel data lake tables?
Thank you for that. So currently at this phase, the logs need to be ingested into the analytics tier. And in the future, if this is enabled, we will of course notify and document that this is a possibility.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And then looks like maybe a couple more questions are coming through now. Just take a look here.
Yeah. So we did have a question about the value of the behaviors. I will answer it again. Maybe it will be good to wrap up with this, and then the more specific UEBA existing capabilities answers I will answer in the chat. So this is the new behaviors layer, as we try to clarify in this webinar, is not only surfacing like the existing UEBA capabilities, anomalies, or insights. They're meant to be this new building block around that really does provide aggregations and sequencing and meaning So while the existing UEBA capabilities rely on this amazing engine we built that calculates ongoing and dynamic baselines going up to 6 months, and looks at deviations from that baseline while also enriching the raw logs. So providing, for example, geolocation and ISP and threat intelligence, and saying, hey, something happened here that is unusual, it's abnormal, it deviates from this baseline we calculated, which is, of course, highly valuable, and we have a lot of trust in it. The behaviors layer doesn't look at deviations or things that are out of the ordinary. It actually takes the raw telemetry from various sources, organizes it, gives it meaning, maps it to MITRE, describes the entities, roles, and influence in that behavior, and provides you a building block that can be, of course, used with UEBA anomalies. It can be used with raw telemetry. It can be used for investigation. For example, when we have an incident, as Taylor showed, and we would like to see what happened with those entities in the 24 hours prior to this incident or the first alert. For the supported data sources, of course, we can look at this one timeline, add raw telemetry for non-supported data sources, but really look at it from one table, one schema, and understand what happened. So it also lowers the bar of expertise and time that it takes to understand the logs, to understand their meaning, to understand their security context. So we're trying to shift from knowing everything and calculate everything and understand everything in our heads to an explainability layer that is, by the way, also very useful when working with agents and AI, because it explains in natural language what is actually happening.
Great. Sounds good. And then we have some more in the Q&A that I think our team will answer in there.
Yes.
Okay, sounds good. Well, that is great. And thank you so much for answering those questions. And thank you so much, Taylor, as well, for being our guest today and for sharing all of the great information with our community. For those of you who do have additional questions on the topic we just covered, those in the Q&A are going to be answered shortly, and any others, please feel free to raise them on the Microsoft Tech Community Discussion Space at aka.ms/Microsoft Sentinel Community. To all the listeners that are still on the line, if you're someone who wishes to aid in the protection of the world from cyber threats and desire to have a say in shaping our strategies, blueprints, and recommendations, then we invite you to become part of our security community. Together, we can make a global impact. So join us at aka.ms/security community. This is also where you'll be notified about the upcoming webinars, events, and other announcements. Thank you all for being part of our community and for joining us on these webinars. We hope to see you next time. Goodbye.